So, dear friends, dear colleagues, let's start. Super. Amadine is coming.
Yeah? Okay, that's
I hope.
should be
Amadine?
coming.
Yeah,
Swap
should be
and
coming. Okay. I'm
All
starting.
this here. This was-
If you then, if you speak, put it in. Huh? But now I'm starting, and then I give you and you the floor, and then it's an opening, blah, blah, and we come to the first panel. In the first panel. So, let's start. Liebe Freundinnen und Freunde.
Dear friends, headphones on, use them. We have interpretation in what languages? Arabic and Dari. Good, so everything should be working. Excellent. I think the first thing, well, this will be the last time I say this, as the person behind this initiative, organizing this event, I'm really happy to do so. And I think today will be a great day. Starting something entirely new. Actually, something entirely new, that in the midst of the European Parliament, the forum we're worried about isn't a conference. It's not a workshop. Nor is it just picking up on a single issue theme. That's not what this is all about. What we want is a European Refugee and Migrants Parliament. We want to found it today. So today is a day that will go down in history. A warm welcome to all of you from 16 member states, I've been told. And you, of course, the migrants and refugee organizations, you come from such a wide range of backgrounds. It's great stuff that we don't just talk about refugees and migrants, but we talk with you and listen to your voice. Your voice counts. So friends, this is really innovative and it's absolutely essential. It's urgently needed that we create something like this. We create an institution. Such a corporate body needs to be created quite simply because, yeah, good, applaud, you're right. We need to tackle this task, and we shouldn't be less than ambitious. We want a parliament for refugees and migrants. That's why we're here. Which is why in this room where we're sitting, well, it will have been born thanks to our colleagues sitting here. We find ourselves, well, over the past years, Martin, where are you sitting? Over there? Oh. It was just over a year ago. Martin from Hamburg, with his Lampedusa refugee group, paid us a visit. And I don't know who else discussed it in our group meeting, talking about the situation of refugees and migrants and what can be done to improve their plight. And somebody came up at one stage. He says, you always talk about us, but we want to talk. We want to take action. And that's how this all came about, if you will. That was the initial seed of the idea to create a refugee, well, first it was just refugees, but later we added migrants, a Refugees and Migrants Parliament. We wanted to found that, and it's important to tackle that job. I recall quite distinctly that when this came up, my political group, the GUI group here in the Parliament, was wildly enthusiastic about it, and you don't see that very often. Those in charge of the finances, sometimes they get together in negotiations saying, well, we have to keep the money where it is. It's going to be too expensive. But the financial people come in saying, if you really want to do something like this, don't worry about the finance. We'll find the money. And that's why we can even be here today, dear friends. And yes, we need to create this parliament. We need to make it happen. And I'll tell you why it's so important. Right now, the individual rights as an asylum seeker and a fair migration policy, as well as immigration into Europe, it's all up for grabs. It's at risk. And we have this active movement. Well, we're seeing more and more authoritarian and anti-democratic governments throughout the world, and even in the middle of Europe, right in our midst. And socialist stroke left-wing, even liberal people, if we fight together as we have been for years, but we can't manage to do anything about this, apparently it's not enough. It's not enough if the NGOs act locally, regionally, nationally. All kinds of work is being done, and it's been done for decades, as we know, but we need your voice here in Europe. We also need it because right-wing populism and right-wing extremism are becoming increasingly mainstream, saying migrants this, migrants that. They're bad-mouthing migrants. They've changed the face of Europe. And if you look at the big picture, you can say that migrants aren't just being left to fend for themselves, but even thousands are allowed to drown in the Mediterranean. In some countries, even in Europe, they're treated worse than animals. I could give you all kinds of examples, but I don't need to do that because you know they're treated like criminals, branded as terrorists, and when they do actually reach our shores, nobody wants to take them. They have to hide for long periods. They're locked away. And in Germany, for example, in my part of the country, in the east of Germany, there's lots of hostility that they encounter. They'll be seen, well, you're just migrants, or they're dismissed as of secondary importance, saying that many of you, there are even large demonstrations against all migration in Europe. To be quite honest, it's bad news when you notice that in the own part of the country that you've grown up in, people are out on the streets protesting against refugees with fascist symbols on their signs, making appeals, saying get rid of them, meaning the migrants and refugees in such a wealthy country as we are in Germany. There are all kinds of examples I could go into. I know you know more about this than I do, so I'm not going to dwell on this. But to be quite frank, we need to hear your voice, not just today, not just on one subject, not even on a list of demands, but we need to create a European political level for you to act within so that governments that have joined together in the European Council, you have the Commission active in many areas, meeting with representatives in the member states on subjects such as work and the guardians of the treaty. We have the European Parliament, where normally the majority here is represented from the 27 or 28 member states, and at some future stage it'll become 27 again. But what we don't have is any kind of representation in Europe, an institution representing the migrants and refugees, asylum seekers in the European institutions, and we need to change that. We need to change that, and we need to create this way forward. We need to make it happen. As politicians here in the Parliament, on behalf of our group, I'd like to welcome you, and Dimitris Doboulos from Syriza in Greece, and my S&D group, Birgit Zippel, who's the coordinator of this in the Libe Committee, as it's called, the Civil Liberties Committee, and Marie-Christine Verjat, who is a true warrior when it comes to refugee rights. She knows Africa inside out. She's a fantastic politician and apparently well known. This is just the beginning. We want to do much more, of course, and in the next round, we want to have this Migrants and Refugees Parliament with other colleagues from other groups. Clearly, this is the beginning of something big. We want to serve you. We as politicians want to create this institution for you and to serve you in that interest and to be a partner, work with you as a partner. Now, you have to be clear, what do you want from us so you can create your organization and join together in Europe? If you don't do it, we're missing an opportunity. We absolutely need to do it, no doubt about it. And during these days that we meet here, it will be of extreme importance. We're not just here to be a talk shop. We want to do real work. We want to take decisions that will create a foundation for us to work in the years ahead. Nobody can take this away from you once we've done it. Just let them try. And let me just say, it's a fantastic initiative, and I call this conference open.
Bismillah. Please, Arabic language. في البداية أريد أن أرحب بالجميع وأيضا الشكر موصول ل European United Left. أشكرهم جدا على.
Yes, good morning everyone, and thank you very much to GUE NGL. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, this open forum in the European Parliament to represent refugees and migrants in Europe. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the members who've been at our sides in this project, Mr. Shaban, Mr. Kourou, Mr. Hassan. Thank you for your help. In this attempt to set up an independent organization in Europe so that we can get the message through that there are bad stereotypes, prejudices, as far as concerns migrants and refugees in Europe. And we need to get the message through as to our objectives, because the Parliament takes decisions, and these have effects on people, on nations. And here in Europe, we are very far from our homelands, and our presence here is directly affected by the decisions that are taken. Some of us are without a state, we are stateless, we don't have resources, we don't have an income, we are exiles, we are foreigners. So what are our objectives? Why do we want to set up this kind of parliament? Well, because our main concern, or the main concern of some, is to export arms to the Middle East and so on, and to have war, to have slaughter, and more, that will produce more exile. So let's begin our work by trying to end the armaments trade, which is so murderous, and put in place a virtuous circle and create a better culture for humanity. Indeed, you have in your constitutions reference to this, but the truth is that many refugees, many migrants in Europe feel the same, whether it be in Malta, in Germany, in Italy. They are all facing the same problems. In Germany, for example, the legislation restricts the movement of the migrants. In Italy, they can't even obtain identity documents as refugees. In Malta, this is the most restrictive, the harshest country, but at the same time, we have people who claim that they are representing the European Union. Where is the European Union and its rights in all this? And so today, that is why in this House we want to launch our own parliament to reverse these bad decisions, because in doing so we will be respecting the interests of the countries and the migrants and the refugees. When decisions, on the other hand, are taken simply to satisfy vested interests or specific interests, then that is only going to produce more war, more exile in the Middle East and in America and in Latin America. I'd like, first of all, now to discuss the situation in the refugee camps in Africa. The situation is very bad. It's very serious. It's alarming, and there's a big difference between the slogans that one hears in Europe and what is happening on the ground in Africa, where there's no respect for human rights and equality, whereas in Europe no one is really taking care of this. People are defending the rights of animals, animal welfare, but what about human rights? If we had respect for human rights, then we wouldn't have exile. And the homeless people who have no job, they're in a permanent state of unemployment. So where are their human rights? So I think we have to restrict this kind of capitalism which has gone beyond the boundaries. In Europe, I don't see human rights. That is why in our parliament, the refugees and the migrants will be present to claim a real, authentic social justice. And together we will make sure that dictatorships are no longer supported in Africa or Latin America, but rather we will support training, education, agriculture, social policies, industry, town planning. That's what we don't have in the countries of the third world, and indeed that's an expression that you have imposed on us. We are not a third world, but there are, of course, radical differences, and you have created the capitalistic society. Well, in any case, thank you very much once again. Thank you to all the organisations who have been supporting us, and thank you to Gouet, thank you to Fabien, Martine, thank you to all the people who have launched this initiative. Sami, unfortunately, has not been able to be here. Thank you very much.
Salam, good morning to you all. In the beginning, I want permission from the International Council of Azhar and thank Herald Hishish and Amandine Bukh, and I have witnessed their hard work in preparing this conference. I welcome you all today in this conference. It's also important that we remember all those who have lost their lives coming to Europe, and we observe a 1 minute silence and stand up for 1 minute. Thank you very much. I am happy that in this conference the main focus is on the resolution of problems of the migrants and refugees, and I am standing alongside you here together and resolving their issues that they are facing in different countries, how they are occupied by the colonialism mentality, racism, and these are the topics that the friends will discuss. And these talks and conferences will resolve the issues of these refugees. These kind of gatherings and meetings will result in resolving the issues of these. There are many difficulties and challenges that the refugees are facing in different parts of the world, especially in Europe. In history, because of wars, accusations, tensions, and other types of harassments, that the people, human beings, were affected and had to leave their home countries so as to get to safe places. My countrymen were also affected due to the battles of superpowers in the poverty-stricken country of Afghanistan, which became a place for the international revenge by all parties under the pretext of bringing peace. However, in fact, they are trying to create a trap for their rivals. The war is becoming more and more intense. The war is becoming more and more intense, and they are seeking their geopolitical and geoeconomic entrance and seeking, and as a result causing great damages. And as part of this struggle, the Afghan people are trapped and badly affected as lifeless creatures, devastated, and are seeking safe places, due to which they have no choice but to flee. In the end, being a refugee is not a crime. Thank you very much.
Recht vielen Dank euch beiden.
Thank you very much for your statement. We have gotten off to a start at least, but we can start now. Well, finishing with the first panel, we need to have discussions on the issues, and then we can break up into the workshops and start with the actual networking. Let's get started then. Could I ask the speaker, Ansumal Sisiku, would you please step up here? I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. From France. Who's that?
Okay. Dann haben wir...
Right. Then Tracy Ayero from the Netherlands. Who's that? Where are you? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, the first panel, okay, the first panel. Speaker should come. You stay, Ali Aslan, Tracy Ayero, wen haben wir noch?
And we still have Siliman Musu and Abu Moro from Italy. Where are they? Please step up here, please. Please join us up here. Just in the front row, perhaps. All of the people who are listed as speakers in the first panel, would you please step up to the front?
You must stay, you not. You not.
So, dear friends, let's start. The confusion is finished. Okay. Ich will bei diesem ersten Panel nur ganz kurz eines sagen.
One thing to say during this first panel. We're gathering facts together here. We're hearing about those who are fighting for fundamental rights and those who are fighting against the exploitation of migrants and refugees. So we're gathering those facts together, we're hearing those experiences, and it's also about being clear about what our tasks and responsibilities are. Each speaker has 5 minutes, and then I also want to hear about your experiences, about what you consider important. This event is actually web streamed, so it's important that others can hear about your experiences. So don't be general. Speak specifically about your experiences so that we can paint a picture. I don't have any more to say. I'll hand over to you, the lady on my left.
You can say something about you.
Okay.
5 minutes, yes?
So my name is Tracy Ayero, and I'm working as the public relations for Stichting Out and Proud. It's an African LGBT organization in Netherlands that was started in 2013 by 5 passionate African refugees. And now the group has over 350 members all over the Netherlands. And we saw the need to help African LGBT in particular, because at that time there was nobody voicing out for them. And the 5 passionate people thought like it was a good idea to come together and fight for human rights. So even though Netherlands is one of the countries that is said to be very liberal, raising up the LGBTI flag high, we as Out and Proud in Netherlands, we see that there are so many challenges. So in my view, I'll talk about the challenges that we are facing as a group. And we believe that in this case, more is supposed to be done. Some of the challenges that we are facing is that the refugee LGBTI cases are not handled properly. And we feel that these people are people that have been persecuted from their original countries, and they really need to be heard. And we say that even though there are rights for LGBT persons in Netherlands, enough is not done. For example, most of the cases are very complicated. Right now we have cases that they say that people are not gay enough, that they accept that they are gay, but they are not gay enough. So when you hear such a statement, it's completely unreasonable. You cannot say that someone is gay, but he is not gay enough, or to say the person is gay, but he's too young to be gay. So as Out and Proud, those are the things that we are facing right now, the challenges that we are facing. Also the hate and homophobia. The homophobia is at a high rate. Even though some people are not speaking out, because these are cases that happen in a heated moment, and if you don't have evidence, there is no way that you're gonna win this case. But we say that something has to be done. 2 months ago, we had a very interesting case, because 2 months ago we had a big pride in Netherlands. And there was this case that a lady was in a shelter house, and she was forced to leave the house immediately because she went and helped to decorate a boat. But the shelter house where she was staying, this shelter house was organized by a Catholic nuns, and they told her that they will not take her back in the shelter house because she's immoral. So in a case like this, we find that the church has to preach love, not hate. So, and during that case, I was called by a journalist, and they asked me to give my opinion. What did I think about the case? And my reaction was, oh yeah, I really think that I expected it to happen because most cases, some people go silent even without speaking about it. So I told this journalist that this girl was really brave to come up and speak for herself, because other people will just go silent and not say anything, because most LGBT people are stigmatized that, oh, they are crazy and refugees are too needy. But in this case, there was someone who had a video of everything, and we really needed to speak out for that. The also worrying thing is the number of LGBTI people fleeing from African originalities. And we are saying to the country, mostly the European people, that the reason why these people are fleeing from Africa to Europe here is because the laws that are governing there, they are not protecting them. So instead of funding these dictatorships, like from my country, Uganda, where I come from, Uganda is one of the countries that has very strange, strong rules that if you're an LGBTI person, you could be killed or sentenced for life. But 60% of our net fundings come from these countries like Europe. And you're funding a person who is, again, terrorizing people and making them to come to Europe. So I believe that something has to be done about that. I talked about stigmatizing people, but also Netherlands in general has played a big role in job sectors, whereby people are educated, but they are bringing expertise from other countries to come and work there. Most LGBT people or most refugees are highly educated, and I believe that if we make use of these refugees or LGBT people, you will not have the need to bring more expertise from abroad. Because the education system and the protocol here is really tough. We find that these people have to learn the language, and sometimes they are told that their diplomas or their degrees, they are not at the level of these countries, which is really very absurd, but because these are very educated people that can run the country. In 2016, I had a privilege to meet the Prime Minister of Netherlands, that's His Excellency Mark Rutte, and some of the things that we talked about during my meeting with him, I told him that I wanted to see more political parties involved in refugee issues, but more especially in the LGBT rights. And I'm happy to say right now that there are parties that are really doing that, and Green Links is one of the parties that is on the front line of helping the LGBT refugees. But also, I would like to see more, not only one party. I would like to see more parties getting involved in refugee issues. So in my conclusion, I say yes, there is some progress in these refugee issues, but more is needed to be done. And this is what exactly Out and Proud is doing, standing up for human rights preservation and dignity, freedom and justice for all. Thank you.
Ja, ich glaube, besser hätten wir das gar nicht eröffnen.
That was a great opening. Thank you, Tracy. That was a really important contribution. Extremely relevant. Now I turn to you, our friend from Hamburg, and you have the floor.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. I don't want to repeat anything, but I'd simply like to thank everyone who has made this conference and this meeting possible. Thank you also for taking part. Thank you to the different refugees and migrant groups. I'm Ali, I'm from Niger, and I'm from the Lampedusa in Hamburg group. We have this opportunity thanks to parties of the left who've invited us here. They invited us here a year ago, affording us the opportunity of speaking for 5 minutes and putting forward some proposals. In order to raise our profile, we need to have a forum, a space here, so that we can take the floor, so that we can talk about our problems, so that we can seek out further contact with the MEPs who are working side by side with migrants. This forum offers us an opportunity to speak out and to claim our fundamental rights. I don't want to monopolize the floor, but I represent the Lampedusa group. But I'm happy to see that we have 16 EU countries taking part in this conference today, and some 30 groups who are here today. I wouldn't call it a victory, but it is a starting point as we try to raise our profile. And I think it's important that as part of this platform we work together, we try to raise our visibility. As refugees in this room, we have to understand we all came in the same boats, we all crossed the Mediterranean, we were saved by the coast guards, and then we were in refugee camps. And now we're here in the European Parliament and we can take the floor. I wouldn't label it a victory, but it does show that anything is possible in this life. Anything is possible, and we have to do even more. We have to speak out and explain why we're here and why we need more of a forum in the EU, whether that be in Brussels or Strasbourg. Let me go back to Lampedusa in Hamburg. We're a group of refugees and migrants who fled war back in 2011. This war was caused by NATO in Libya in 2011. We're the victims of this war, and when that happened, we found ourselves pushed out. Our lives were in danger. We had to flee Libya and make our way to Europe. We didn't really intend to come to Europe. We never wanted to come to Europe. And Europeans need to know that. If there had been another continent nearby, we would have gone to that continent. But Europe is our neighbour. So I had to cross over and go to Italy. In Italy, we were split apart and put in detention centres or reception centres, and we stayed there for 2 years, up until the end of 2013. So we lived in those camps, we suffered too, and we were told that in Europe there's a law, And there are labels put on those people arriving in Europe. You're called migrants and you have to undergo procedures. And it took 2 years for those processes to take place. And then the Home Secretary said that those who had fled war in 2011 could be given official status. There are other countries where refugees can receive an official status, but then there are also economic migrants. And at one point, all refugee camps were shut, and we were given 500 euros and told, well, get on with it. Fend for yourselves. And then we went to France, Belgium, Germany. We left Italy. So most of our group ended up in Hamburg. And it was winter when we arrived in Hamburg. We were in Caritas shelters. But then we were told you've got to leave. So we found ourselves in the street. Then we understood that there was something wrong. There was something that wasn't functioning. It wasn't for humanitarian reasons that Italy granted us an official status. We were just given residence permits for Italy. And you can move within the EU with that paper, but you can't work. So you can stay in another EU member state for 3 months, but then you have to make your way back to Italy. So many of us were homeless. So we had gone through this situation in Libya, then we'd also been in camps in Italy, and then we'd gone to Germany. So we'd left Libya, and the Western world had contributed to that war in Libya. Then we went to Italy. And then we were given papers. That gave us freedom of movement, but we couldn't set down any roots. Germany is one of the countries that supported that war in Libya. I don't know the exact involvement of Germany, but Germany did have some involvement. So why do our papers not allow us to stay and work in Germany? That was the impetus for us to create our group. We spoke among ourselves. There were some 350 members, and we shared the same story. We were all together in the street. We'd all suffered in the same way. So we tried to make our voice heard. We took part in demonstrations. We went to the local administration and said, we have been victims of this NATO-caused war. That was our very slogan. And we said, we want to be given the right to stay in Germany, we want to stay in Hamburg, and we want to work. That was what we were asking for, and what we've been asking for since 2013. To date, only 5% of our group have been able to stay thanks to the battle we've been involved in. After some negotiations, the mayor gave us the opportunity to stay and not go back to Italy or to be deported, and that was thanks to our work. We did have people on our side who said in the German constitution there is a provision or a law which can allow a group of migrants or refugees who work together to stay. This is paragraph 23 of the constitution. So we used paragraph 23 in our dealings with the German authorities. But we haven't been given that opportunity because of institutional racism. But we continue to ask and push. But there are racist institutions which prevent us from enjoying our full rights. So we continue to put pressure, we continue to demonstrate, and we did have a lot of support. We had solidarity in the streets from the German people who welcomed us. So 5 years have passed, and some people continue to live with German people who give us food, who finance us, who give us funding to get train tickets and so on. We've organized demonstrations, conferences, we've taken to the street, we've joined other groups so that our rights as migrants can be upheld. So not just our rights as a group, but all migrants. There are many young people who are studying issues of migration in European universities, and they want to use their knowledge. But they also have that knowledge partially thanks to us, migrants and refugees. So we've tried to explain our stories to them and help. But why have these laws been voted? In Germany there's paragraph 23, but why haven't we been able to use paragraph 23 as a group? We continue to point to paragraph 23, but we've never been able to benefit from it. And that's been really frustrating for us. You look at a country like Germany, people use the law and then they take racism and they mix it with the law. That's completely unacceptable for us. That's why we will continue to fight until we can fully enjoy our rights. We know that Europe is drifting towards the right, but that can't be blamed on migration. Racism is the root problem. We're not the problem. Refugees aren't the problem. Migrants aren't the problem. The problem is the European and other institutions who make a quick buck thanks to wars and thanks to the selling of arms. We denounce that. Then there are also bilateral agreements. We will never negotiate on freedom of movement. Freedom is freedom. No institution or European institution can ask us to sign agreements which are against our freedom and our right to exist. You're born with freedom. Each and every one of us is born with freedom. The freedom of movement and of residence is a right, and we're going to ask for it here in Strasbourg and with the EU in general. We also want to abolish Frontex and the Dublin Convention. The Dublin Convention prevents us from working in Germany. The Dublin Convention means that those who have been rejected in Italy cannot request asylum in other countries. We want you to push for this in the Parliament. Push for an abolition of these laws. The same as deportation of refugees and closed centres. And there are also transit centres being built in Germany, between Austria and Germany. Such centres need to be discontinued. And what about development aid? Instead of negotiating with us to make development aid part of trade, part of agreements between us and the other country, don't do that. Speak with us. We want to call on the EU today. Don't make any decisions without us. Don't make decisions about us. Take the ideas of the countries we leave and the countries we arrive to into account. So we request our freedom and we request the dignity that we deserve. We're also fighting against racism, xenophobia, sexism and homophobia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. Right, we're going to create a parliament, and parliamentarians need to respect speaking times, as I'm sure you'll experience firsthand. Thank you for a fantastic statement of great significance for us. You broached many different stories, people's experiences, and many people around here resonate with what you've said. Next, you.
أريد أن أتكلم باللغة العربية. السلام عليكم جميعا. Yes, okay. أريد أن أتكلم باللغة العربية.
Thank you for giving me the floor, and good morning, everyone. Colleagues, thank you very much for inviting us here, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. I come from Italy. I've got a lot of issues I'd like to raise in this forum in the European Parliament, and I would like to get some assistance. We are a group of young people. We have organized. We've set up a group which is called Sfrutta Zero. It's an agricultural group. It's a group which wants to make sure that agricultural workers are not exploited. So we have set up this organization, Sfrutta Zero. You may know that migrants in this situation have been suffering because of the very bad working conditions that we have been subjected to. We are treated sometimes like animals. Unfortunately, that has been the case in Italy. In Italy, there are people who have been living for 15 years in Italy without being able to speak in Italian, so they're very marginalized in the way that they have been received there in Italy. Some of them have obtained political asylum status in Italy. On the basis of international conventions which have been in place for many years. We have Chapter 7 of the Convention on Human Rights. So what about us in all this? We have Chapter 7, but it's not respected. And these are binding international conventions which are being totally ignored. In Italy, the asylum seekers are not respected, their rights are not respected. In 2011, when our rights were trampled on, we were the victims of physical violence in the workplace. We were subjected to humiliation in the farms in which we were working. We got together, all the refugees, and we went on strike against the terrible working conditions. And today we have this organization, Sfrutta Zero, and we are the voice of the people in these camps in Italy. We are trying to get the message across that people have to react. They have to take their own destiny in their own hands. We're working in the agricultural sector. We've organized so that we can improve working conditions. We have seen that we've been subjected to humiliating working conditions. And what we want now is our dignity in the workplace. The project is an agricultural sector project, but it's not just restricted to the agricultural sector because it's also political. It's an attempt to integrate refugees in society. Refugees don't need much. They want to be able to speak the language to a certain level. They want to be able to study. They want to be able to read their administrative documents so that they can be part of society. Unfortunately, if a refugee can't speak the language, he has no interaction with the authorities. That's a matter of pure fact. And obviously, if they're not going to provide language courses, then they're not going to learn the language in the camps. And speaking of the camps, these are very basic. They are composed of prefabricated buildings. They're never in the centre of town. They're always 2 or 3 kilometres away, so they're totally isolated. And consequently, what we're doing is creating a little state within a state. We have parallel existences. We are marginalised from the society. So my question to you, or my invitation to you and to you members of the European Parliament, is to come and visit us in these camps. Perhaps at that point you will really see what's happening and change your opinions. Perhaps in that case there will be a better chance to get a solution. In Svrutadzer, we've not received any aid, any assistance from the central government in Italy or the local authorities. We are completely alone. We depend on charity. We got 4,000 euros as an initial start-up funding, and with that we tried to have some activities in the agricultural field. We bought some agricultural tools, some machinery with this sum of money so that we could do the work. And in 2018 we cooperated with 19 representatives of all the or rather with the Italian unemployed. We managed to make a contact with them. They are not migrants, there's a distinction there, but nevertheless they're in a sort of similar position. So, and we've been working with these local people without any problems. In 2018 we cultivated the fields producing tomatoes, and we were able also to use these tomatoes to make sauce and put them on the market. So we can see that this project has expanded somewhat, and we've been able to do something and actually sell the products that we have produced. We're trying to work with Austria, Switzerland, France, Germany. We're continuing to expand the scope of our sales to neighbouring countries. Obviously, we're not multinationals. We're just a very small enterprise, and we're a sort of cooperative, if you like. At the end of the day, we don't want to be involved with multinationals who are the very source of the exploitation in the first place and in the source of the infringement of the human rights. So it's a very wide-ranging project. And through this project, I think we'll be able to help all migrants, not just ourselves in the association, but all those who need help. We're going to be accompanying them in their progress to build a better future for all of us. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. Wer hat es geschafft? Okay. Wie ist? Asuman. Ja, okay. Okay, ja. Welcome, Asuman.
Bonjour. Ja, unser letzter
Our final speaker has joined us. One point I wanted to make, I think it's becoming clear that not only do we need a refugee parliament, but we also need to certainly include the broader circle of migrants. That is important. And I would like to welcome our last speaker, but there's Barbara Spinelli with us, another colleague from our political group. She's from Italy. So maybe she knows the kind of situation you were talking about. So for 5 minutes speaking time, I hand over to the next speaker. I think we should agree between us that we should be short and concise when we speak.
Oui, bonjour à tous.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I arrived a bit late, but here I am. Sissoko Ashuman is my name. I'm part of the international coalition of undocumented migrants. This coalition was created in the years when we created the European Social Forum in Paris. And we got in touch with Italians first, then Germans, Swiss activists and Belgians, and now in many different countries in Europe we're quite active, and also in Africa. But before I go into that, I'd like to introduce the movement that we represent in Paris. It's called the 75 Coordination Undocumented Migrants Worker, created in '96. The undocumented workers back then took a decision to no longer live in hiding, to no longer be afraid of the police, and not just to let things happen to them. They came out of the shadow, started to demonstrate and to occupy public spaces. And one of the things they did was they started to occupy the churches. Those of you may recall. And why do we choose churches, you may ask? For undocumented workers, entering a church, we felt it was like entering an embassy, because when you enter an embassy, often that's not good for us, because this can openly lead us to be deported. And for us, the church is a sacred place, a holy place, and a place where we can find refuge. And over the years, the churches became less and less welcoming towards migrants. And in the middle of the 20s, the 2000s, the first time I came in was in 2001. I've been in France, I would recall, for 25 years. I came in 1993. So I worked for 7 years, but in 2001 I encountered my first difficulties with the police. I spent 2 months in prison with a ban to remain on national territory, and once I was released, my boss even refused to hire me, and didn't even pay me in my back pay, even though I worked there for 7 years, declared with official pay slips, etc. And so we need to start thinking about this, we thought, and we realized that in labor law it is stipulated that workers must be protected against any abusive practices by their employer or abusive dismissal. So we made an appeal to the trade union back in 2003. It took 2 years. It was finally in 2005. We ended up with 4 pages summing up what workers' rights are, in inverted commas. When I say it's not necessarily French workers' rights or foreign workers' rights, but European rights. And we sat down and organized that and started acting on it at the national level. So why do we have this undocumented coordination group that works internationally? Since the first European directives in 2004, we felt that we needed to organize at the European level as well. We felt that was important because Europe, after all, determines what general direction states must head in, although they all do it according to their own convenience. But we needed to take things up one level at the European level, including the European level, which is why we created this international coalition of undocumented workers and migrants. And in the introductory document, we've made these points known. We've been doing quite a number of things, but one of the things that we felt was the most important was in 2013 when we crossed the Mediterranean from Europe towards Africa. We went to Turin, where there was the European Social Forum and the World Social Forum. And as at the time when we arrived, there were more than 50,000 people who came from 4 different continents who were there to discuss the question of freedom of circulation and freedom of establishment for all. It is crucial for this coalition to be seen and heard on the subject of freedom of movement. If there's no legal way to express our voice, we had to work with the Italian, French and German associations to make our voices heard so that we could take the boat in Genoa, Italy, and go demonstrate at the World Social Forum in Tunis. Once we arrived at La Goulette, well, everybody was surprised. We were deported back to Europe because of our irregular situation here in Europe. So for us, we utterly failed to understand what that was all about, because in Tunisia, the people who are on our side are Tunisians, Malians, people from Côte d'Ivoire and other black African countries. So we decided to come with the undocumented people in Tunisia, because international agreements apply to others, but not to the undocumented Tunisians in their country. The Home Affairs Minister, who spoke with us for 45 minutes, told us he supports us, but the Tunisians have to stay. And we said, no. If we can't all stay, we're all going to go back with him. And so we spent 6 hours occupying the boat bridge to land, and then we were able to continue on to France and continue with our struggle. And we speak at the national and international levels, speaking our voice with our demands. We have no chairman, we have no official spokesman at the European level. Each member state has their delegates, their representatives, and we work in a collegiate manner, which is when we organize events in one country or another, it is the host country that becomes the spokesman for the coalition. And if there are several spokesmen in one country, it is the one who came up with the idea to organize the event, the collective group that becomes the spokesman for the event in national and international events. And in the way we work, we decided to emphasize, well, we use who's available. We need intellectuals to help us to really organize things, but we need people who are available from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to take responsibility for the movement. And when some decisions need to be taken, for example, we have the weekly demonstrations in Paris that we've been organizing for 17 years. We've never missed a week. And the demonstrations, the marches, occupying public spaces, and also hunger strikes. And the marches we've organized at a European level. But 7 years ago, one of the major tools that we had was people who were able to vote. For example, when we occupied the place or when we were on strike, those who felt close were able to take a decision then to continue to support us or to stop. But those who are standing beside us are there to help us. But also you have the undocumented people who take the decisions, who make the commitment to take responsibilities. So even though we do have spokesmen, very often if you're not physically on the spot, you're not consulted by those taking decisions. And which is why we say we're a grassroots democracy, on the spot, where action can take place, where you don't have anyone who's in charge. And we have 3 different units within our coordination in the 75 movement. And we make an appeal to the undocumented workers to create a group themselves and to address the authorities, to get in touch with those who are in charge of organization. Every time we organize an event, whether it's in the European Parliament or at the borders, or, for example, when there's the Franco-African Summit in Paris, for example, we always think that when we organize actions alongside these events, we're no longer invisible. Well, we don't want to be unheard or invisible, and we thought, therefore, we should be able to organize our own initiatives. What's happening in France right now, we have the immigration days in Mali, in Gaidon, 10 months ago, to try to get our voice heard and to convey that message to the African population and more generally to Mali. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Ja, besser kann man.
Thank you. I don't think that there could possibly be a better introduction to this discussion. In the battles that we wage in the member states, in our struggles in different areas, we now have a possibility for further statements, questions to be raised, whatever, to react. But please keep it short and simple. We can only make a beginning today.
Und dazu sagen, woher man kommt.
And please state where you're from.
Merci. Je suis Serge.
My name is Serge, from the Belgian Coordination of Undocumented Persons. Let me explain what we've done, and which shows that when people spur themselves into action and when we've got support from the left, we can achieve something. So, under the current government, those undocumented workers who don't have papers have had their requests fall on deaf ears. So we have met with citizens. We've said to people, look, undocumented workers live among you. Our children go to the same schools as your children. Take us into account. And these exchanges actually bore fruit. We got support. And we had host communities created. People took action. And then when the so-called migrant crisis happened, our citizens took action and opened up their homes. The government had completely destroyed the system, but people were willing to open up their homes, and that created momentum. So we, as undocumented workers, demonstrated, and we asked the unions to sit around a table and find a response to migrant issues. One shouldn't criticize migrants. It's not about that. It's about humanity. You know, you have to look at the human face of migrants. They are men, women, and children too. So we speak out against the asylum policy in Belgium, which, since it has come into force, has brought nothing to the country or to Europe. It's more a neoliberal image which makes everyone worse off, and it hurts those who are at the bottom of the pecking order, the migrants, and who are most likely to be victims of exploitation. So what we did was we got all of the people around the table. Well, not all of the government representatives. They didn't want to know. But the left turned up. The left realised and acknowledged there was a problem in Belgium when it comes to asylum and migration. So they realised there was a problem in Europe and Belgium alike. And when there is a problem, you have to try to find a solution. Doesn't matter whether you're a minister or whatever you do. You can't deal with poverty by leaving people in poverty. So we realised that we needed to talk. But we represent some 7 groups, and we had to decide what we wanted to say to the government. So we had a grassroots survey. We spoke to people. We had this survey, and the result of that is the document I'm holding in my hand. That's the result of the work we carried out by consulting the grassroots. And we're working step by step. We have just had elections. We had municipal elections last year. And of course, we live at local level in communes, so the mayors can't ignore us. They have to try to find solutions. Sometimes the mayors at local level say, oh no, it's not my problem, federal level needs to deal with you. But no, housing, education, training, that needs to be dealt with locally. And some people are crying out for training. And don't forget that people arriving on our shores have a lot to offer. We have to capitalize on that. People have come to this country not just for themselves but also for their families, and they're doing their best for themselves but also for their new country. So we're also working on that and development issues. We're here today to remind you of some key ideas. Human rights. Don't trample on those. And then, with our Belgian example, we've shown that if you spur yourself into action, you can obtain results. We've achieved victories. And then there's also the issue of locking up children. Europe should speak out against this. How can you lock up children in the 21st century? And what is that? It's absolutely unacceptable to do that. Children have freedoms too. Why would you lock up a child just because his parents don't have papers? Closed centres are the worst thing about modern-day Belgium and modern-day Europe. That has to come to an end. The left and we have managed to achieve some victories. We know that thanks to you we can do that. But every day the Western world closes its eyes to the violence committed against women. That's terrible. But the worst violence committed against a woman is when she is deprived of her rights, of her permit, her residence permit. That makes a woman vulnerable. She is vulnerable to all forms of exploitation. How can we speak out against violence when it's been created by you? Give us rights and allow us to be part of the rule of law. Allow us to be part of the Belgian rule of law and give us official status. Because if someone's been here for 10 years or 15 years, how can they still not have any papers? That kind of situation has to end. Thank you.
So, ich möchte...
Excellent. I see women asking for the floor. I'm going to do it this way. We're going to have to try to mix things up and give equal speaking time, so I won't give the floor to you just now, but the young woman over there who's asking for the floor. And then way back in the room. Yes, you. Yes, please take the floor.
Hello, my name is Hala Akari from the Swedish Syrian Association. I would say that as challenges today are increasing for refugees and immigrants in Europe and internationally, the need to unite is getting bigger, and the need to influence is getting also more crucial. The Refugee and Immigrant Parliament now and the Global Summit of Refugees in Geneva in June are steps toward to be more heard and to be more to have more influence. But what we are really missing is to have a place on the table of policy making and decision taking. We implement things, we are partners in things, but we always implement. We are not asked before a decision is taken or policy is made. So what our aim now is that place. Now we are here, now we are more organized than ever. The need is huge, so I think that it's time that politicians in Europe and globally can give us a place. So by having partnership with refugee-led organizations, migrant-led organizations, to take very crucial and important decisions when it comes to our problems and policies. Thank you.
Genau darum geht's. Genau das müssen.
That's exactly what it's about. We have to understand this kind of cooperation at the table and not behind the table. Okay. This man really at the back with the very nice suit and tie.
Entschuldigung. Ihr müsst euch immer wieder melden. Das ist das Leben.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Jamil Maqsood and I came from Pakistani administered Kashmir some 18 years ago. I have 2-3 suggestions that first of all, the refugees which are coming from third world, they are not properly skilled. And the European Union and the European countries and the states should initiate an intensive skilled education or skilled migration program so that the people who are coming from Africa or Asia or from those countries where the standard of education and the skill-based education is very low could be facilitated properly. Secondly, for the refugees, there should be intensive language courses so that they can assimilate in the society well in order to have a decent life. Relying on the social help, relying on the people's help and relying on small jobs is not the permanent solution to this refugee crisis. And the third one is that the European Union as a collective should expand its skilled training and skilled education program to Africa and to Asian countries so that if the people or the young people are coming to this world for a better life or to have better opportunities, at least they should have a skill to be able to find a better job in the European market. In order to have these things, the people, the young men who are already in the European countries should go immediately for the language schools and skill-based training so that they could have a decent life in this continent. Thank you very much.
Ja, ihr merkt, es ist eine Menge an Fakten, was wir hier.
Well, there are all kinds of facts that we can take note of and try to add it all up. You next, and then, in the interest of democracy, somebody from on this side of the room. Well, that's the way it is. Some people won't get a chance in this round.
Yes, hello, good evening. My name is Spogme Jabarkhil from Afghan Women Organization. When we are talking about undocumented refugees, then my perspective for refugee women who have been victim for prostitution, victim for violence, victim for undocumented to go around and sell their bodies, and even have been under the violence from people who is citizenship in our countries. So my suggestion is which help could we get to those women? Why I hear a lot of my colleagues talk about refugee generally, but I will tell you that we have a big problem with the women and minor girls too, that we have to strongly take care of them and strongly suggest to make a decision so women could not be deported, forced deported to any countries where they have come from. And especially I will say women from Afghanistan, because of a cultural background, because of religion background, it's very hard to be a lone mother or a girl to be deported back to a country like that. Thank you so much.
Ja, das ganze Thema Frauen, ne? Also Geschlechterproblematik.
This whole issue of women, that's a key issue. That's the key issue in our planning and what's in the pipeline. So this man over there was next. Then you, the person I'm pointing to. Who else? Then you.
So sorry. Bitte.
I would like to speak in Arabic.
Thank you.
الأخوة والأخوات المناضلين من أجل الحرية المساواة.
Well, brothers and sisters, fellow activists, all you who are trying to get rights for refugees and minorities, we've all come here together because we've all been through the same suffering. We're waging the same battle. I come from Libya. I'm a political activist in my country, which was destroyed by NATO in 2011. If we want to have change, if we want to claim our rights, then we have to be bold and to speak out clearly about all the bad experiences and injustices and humiliations that we have undergone both in our own countries and in Europe. The EU and NATO have committed war crimes in Libya and other countries. So the question, why are refugees in Europe now? Because of what's happening in their countries, and they had to flee these countries to get a decent life and to have dignity. Afghanistan, Yemen, Libya, Syria, Iraq. Who destroyed those countries? It's true, we do have dictators and criminals who were in power. Criminals. But nevertheless, the European Union and the big powers are responsible for crimes also and for actions creating millions of victims, people who've lost their country. 70 million refugees chased from their countries, deprived of education, deprived of health care, deprived of a home, which their parents were killed. They've lost everything. Who is responsible? We demand freedom and justice. And we want the criminals to be punished. And today we're at the very heart of things in this Parliament to talk about the disadvantaged, the poor, the marginalised, and this concerns the rights of all those who've had their rights taken away, whether these be cultural, social or political. My two brothers were killed in Libya because of the terrorism there. They were killed, however, by weapons imported from Europe. The weapons that killed them came from Europe, and they were killed. We have to stop this arms trade and this interference in our countries. We are born free, and no one can take our freedom away. This struggle for liberty, for justice, for equality, all these rights are essential, but we will continue our combat for these rights and for dignity of black people in particular who are being killed. We are against this neocolonialism and this modern slavery. Why do we have this injustice? My country has been destroyed. Syria has been destroyed. Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, because of the European intervention and because, of course, of our corrupted leaders. People now suffer from unemployment, from racism, from forced migration. It's not a life. We are dying, and we're trying here to show that we are going to fight for our rights and stop modern slavery and racism and interference in our countries. People are free. peoples are free. They have a right to life. Now, we can talk about all this here between ourselves, but what about France and its role in the conflict? The UK, they also have been involved and have exported weapons. So stop interfering. We have now a right to choose how to move around freely and have a home and have dignity and freedom. We claim these rights and we claim them out loud. We are human beings just like you, and we ask that this absurdity which exists in the world stop. Democracy, freedom for all, and especially in the memory of the victims of those who have died. We're going to fight to the last for our rights.
Und genau deswegen sind
And that's exactly why we're here. That's exactly why we're here, to join forces. It's quite right to say we need a strong voice to combat this neo-colonialism and interference in many countries, the resulting wars as a result. And it's hardly any surprise that people end up fleeing these countries. We are partners. That's why we're here. It's good that you've raised those points. Who was next? I think it was you over there, wasn't it? And him? The two of you? Then I'll take two more maybe. And then that will be it. Here in the front? And you. Yeah, okay. Sorry, that's all we can do. That's the way it is. In this first round, we can't take any more speakers. Please keep it short.
Monsieur, dame, bonjour.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Fantou Mako, a Moroccan. I work for the migrants organization in Lille, a member of the CSPE as well. On behalf of French migrants who want to work with isolated minors, unaccompanied minors, these young people who are in France can hardly be discussed without addressing the psychological mindset of these young people. It's very important. There's an urgent need to discuss them when we see the number of attempted suicides amongst these young people that have gone through so many years of difficulty, and I couldn't possibly exaggerate, because they've been isolated, the victims of violence, verbal violence, sexual harassment, the list goes on, and they lose all hope for any better future. For those who are lucky, they can get a home in a special detention center, an emergency shelter, or the others are in the streets. What can we do for these children who are unaccompanied psychologically? What do we do when it comes to child's rights? There are 5 points: civic rights, economic rights, political rights, social rights, and cultural rights. We as social workers feel helpless trying to do justice to this dramatic situation, to try to generally raise awareness of these problems. So long as we don't consider this at an official political level, all we're doing is putting off the crisis, the humanitarian crisis, which is very close to our homes. We need your hope. We need to find ways to take care of these children as soon as they arrive. They have no difficulty in finding their way in this new society. The child arriving will be the citizen of the future. Ladies and gentlemen, if we don't take care of these children, we're going to end up with angry adults who will be victims of their life story, filled with hate that came from the country of their origin. We had the example with the children of Moroccan and Algerian parents. I'm not going to recall what's happened. But when people feel uprooted, rootless, and when they don't have a father or a mother, it's time to act. Ladies and gentlemen, we need you, because fine speeches only go so far. We need action. Thank you.
Vielen herzlichen Dank, ganz wichtig.
That's also really important. Now I'll hand over to you, sir.
Bonjour à tous.
My name is Komod Amesh. Good morning. I'm a founding member of AXOR, Solidarity Action for Refugees, which is headquartered in Strasbourg. I'm also part of Africa Europe Interact, based in Germany. I have a few comments that I'd like to share here. Let me thank those who took the initiative and have allowed us to speak in this parliament. This is a place of symbolic importance, and we have an important audience here today. I'd like to talk about EU action in African countries, in particular Morocco and Niger. Have we understood the consequences of action, hasty action, when deals are struck with African states? The EU has an agreement with Niger in order to stop migration, because what happened in Morocco apparently wasn't enough, and I think the EU is acting in haste and is contradicting itself. What happens in Niger? So there's an agreement on free movement, but that's not being upheld. Niger has to play the European Union's game. African immigrants are pushed back into Niger. So you have to impose checks at the border and stop migrants from moving. And this system has created to many people being victims. To those who have tried to left Libya have been able to. We see a system where there is sexual and financial abuse. People are scared that they'll be rejected by the Niger authorities, but they can't move either. And the people of Niger feel that they're being invaded by immigrants. So there's a constitutional vacuum, meaning that it's not clear what to do with those arriving in Niger. This means there's more human trafficking in that area. It was the EU which created the OECO to deal with human trafficking and modern slavery. But then this is a complete contradiction in action. And then we see the same system. We saw the same system in Morocco from 2004 until 2013. The EU wanted Morocco to deal with immigrants, but there was again a legal vacuum because of an onslaught of migrants. And there was a disagreement between the UNHCR and the Migration Board in Morocco. Human rights were flouted at that time, and this was because the EU had acted in haste without having studied the potential consequences of its action. There was widespread humiliation and abuse of human rights for over 10 years on Moroccan soil. But action was needed. I think the EU needs to take a good hard look at its consequences when it intervenes in Africa. Then we also have the common European asylum process underpinned by the Lisbon process. So this has been around since 2010. It means that all European Union member states are supposed to have the same asylum system, but refugees in France don't receive the same treatment or the same rights as an asylum seeker arriving in Germany or Italy. So there's supposed to be this EU agreement on how migrants and asylum seekers are treated. But then you see that there are camps set up in Germany, no financial assistance is provided. The situation is different in Italy. Perhaps things are better in France because there is freedom of movement when you apply for asylum, and there is financial assistance. We don't understand why there is difference of treatment, even though member states are supposed to act in the same way. Let me, by way of conclusion, speak about cooperation and assistance between the EU and African states. There is a strategy to provide aid to African authorities, but it hasn't necessarily been a good thing. There are widespread crises in Africa. The aid that is provided to Africa doesn't actually trickle down to the Africans and the African youth. Instead of giving and throwing money at Frontex doesn't do its role. It was created in 2004. One of its missions was to provide support and save immigrants, but it's not really doing that, Frontex. Then we also have the creation of Eurosur, which is also not a solution to migration. The actual solution would be to provide financial support to local structures. These structures actually work with young people. They provide funding for micro projects. There needs to be real support for refugees. And then there's this question, why do refugees come to Europe? In the Geneva Convention of 51, it doesn't say that you have to ask for asylum in the nearest country. There has to be security and safety. Those who go to nearby countries can't integrate. There's no social security. These are problems which we need to look at if we're really going to help young people. Thank you.
So, liebe Freundinnen und Freunde.
Well, dear friends, everything that we've been hearing about, all these stories from different angles, we can take it from there in the workshops and determine what areas we need to be focusing on the most. We're going to have a second panel discussion, and both colleagues who have asked to speak. It was you. Would you please indicate who you are? And here in the front, you as well. The two of you, you should be the ones who are first speaking in the second panel. I'm really terribly sorry, but we do need to move on to the second panel discussion. Could I ask my colleagues Marie-Christine to step up to the front? Welcome to you, and my German colleague, Sabine Lösing. She too is a very dedicated activist in foreign affairs. I'm pleased to see her here.
Danke euch. Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous.
Good afternoon. I just want to announce that the groups or representatives of the groups who want to make amendments to the resolution can come to me until about 12 o'clock. I will be collecting feedback, important amendments which you feel should be made. And at the same time, between 11 and 12:30, there will be speed interviews of the different groups. And you can go to Heraldo. Where are you? So please go to Heraldo if you're interested in giving a short interview. Thank you.
Is it possible that the speaker come with me, please? Oh, it's the same thing. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I prefer on the right.
Yeah.
It's more easy. Is it possible to begin, please? Please, is it possible to sit down and you can begin? J'ai des choses écrites sur 3 documents, c'est super. It's okay? My name is... Oh, I speak in French, sorry. It's better for me and for you. Donc, je m'appelle...
My name is Marie-Christine Verja. I'm a member of the Left United European Front, and I deal with immigration issues, have ever since my election back in 2009. I'm happy to chair this second panel discussion. I've been reading your document, your draft resolution. Yes, your draft resolution. And I was, well, I won't say pleasantly surprised, although I was. It really only confirmed what I suspected was the case. And I think that our political group could sign this resolution virtually word for word, because it's exactly the kind of thing we've been fighting for. And that's very important to note, given the struggle ahead of us, particularly when we talk of the European Union. There are some people, it was a Belgian who was saying, we need the left. I think that we all need to work together. It's important for you to get yourselves organized, and you work with one another, between yourselves. The questions and your demands, I think, are largely shared. They're very much common, and they can only be truly addressed successfully, collectively. And you need us because it's a fight for equal rights, as many people have been saying repeatedly, for the freedom of movement, which increasingly is being challenged by the European Union and its member states. I also think that you need to realize what responsibilities we have, respectively. Europe is trying to push its political responsibilities to outside of Europe, externalizing its responsibility. The member states have increasing responsibilities in trying to define European policies. And there's no point in just addressing European institutions, but bear in mind that it's also the member states that are the driving force behind these policies. And one final thing, some of the speakers were asking for a European right to asylum. You don't understand why there's no genuine European right to asylum. Well, that's a battle that was waged a long time ago, and the European Commission was in favor of the idea, but it was absolutely vetoed by the member states. And today, we're even further away from that reality. Increasingly, people challenging even the very right to apply for asylum in the European Union. One thing we're fighting for is to get the European states to ratify the International Convention on the Right of Migrant Workers and their families, which is one real possibility to promote equal rights. Because if the member states of the European Union haven't signed this, it's because one of the things it calls for is migrants have rights regardless of their status. Let me finish by saying it's easy, if you're a European, to fight for this equality, because we're privileged. We're right. We have the right to move around, but we need to fight together to ensure that this is a genuinely universally applicable right to all inhabitants of the planet. All citizens of the world need to join hands and join forces. And I'm happy to hear from you. I'm giving you the floor. We have 5 speakers, unlike what you see on this sheet of paper. Let me start by giving the floor to Abdul Hakim Hamidi. Is that how you pronounce your name? Representing the World Hazara Council.
Merci. Dear distinguished guests, the EU Parliament members, international organization, media people, friends and colleagues. First of all, I would like to express my deepest condolence for those people who have lost their lives on the way of European safe countries, and those who have been killed, tortured and persecuted in conflict, war and terrorist attacks in Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and some other African countries. Indeed, all these tragic events have imposed the hard moments, sad and distressed days upon us. According to Gallup's annual global immersion reports, the year of 2017 was a year of sadness, stress, worry, anger and physical pain. The report shows in the year dominated by war, political division and humanitarian crisis, nearly 4 in 10 people told pollsters that they experienced stress or worry the previous day. 1 in 5 people reported feeling anger, while 23% experienced sadness and 31% suffered physical pain. CNN writes, the results mean the world is more negative than at any point since the polling campaign started in 2005. The title of most negative year in the Negative Experience Index had been shared by 2015 and 2016 with source of 28, but 2017 recorded a source of 30. For me, the clear result of this polling has also a clear message, which is if we live very far from epicenter of fire, war and conflict, that doesn't mean we are safe, happy, secure and healthy. On the contrary, it means that all of us, regardless of religion, color, language, ethnicity and geography, test the bitter test of pain. Dear friends, Afghans paid a heavy price for being in the front of anti-communism war. Almost 7.5 million refugees in the world, 2 million killed, 1.5 million injured and disability. How much we have to pay for being in the front of counter-terrorism war. According to the United Nations Under the Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, 40,000 civilians have been killed and injured during the 4 years of national unity of government in Afghanistan. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, UNAMA's reports say the total civilian casualties were 10,548 in 2014, 11,002 in 2015, 11,500 in 2016, and 10,453 in 2017. More recently, UNAMA has documented 8,000 civilian casualties in the first 9 months of this year. Considering such a dangerous situation and increasing insecurity and instability, I would like to raise a moral question whether the deportation and sending refugees back is fair. These statistics have shown that the Afghan government has failed to enforce responsibility to protect. In particular, protecting civilians such as Hazara community, where the second Vice President of Afghanistan, Mr. Sarwar Danish, says the killing of Hazara is not an accident, it's a targeted one. In paragraph 138 of the 2007 World Summit Outcome Document, heads of state and government affirmed the responsibility to protect their own population from genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing and crimes against humanity, and accepted a collective responsibility to encourage and help each other uphold these commitments. Also, according to the paragraph 139 of this document, the international community, through the United Nations, also has responsibility to use appropriate diplomatic, humanitarian and other peaceful means in accordance with Chapter 6 and Chapter 8 of United Nations Charter to help protect population from genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. We are lucky for having a protection system in the European countries, and I really appreciate your cooperation and your attention. But we should never forget that there are thousands of people still living under the risk, fear, threats, and stress. I believe that European countries need to review their policies towards Afghan refugees, especially for Hazara people, and also signing of the contract titled Joint Way Forward on Migration Issues between Afghanistan and the EU is against paragraph 1 and 2 of Article 21 of Lisbon Treaty, which says the Union's actions on the international sense shall be guided by the principles which have inspired its own creation, developed an enlargement, and which it seeks to advance in wider world democracy, the rule of law, and the universality and indivisibility of human rights and fundamental freedoms, respect for human dignity, the principle of equality and solidarity, and respect for the principle of United Nations Charter and international law. Dear friends, although terrorism knows no boundaries and it is increasing dramatically, I think leaving the countries is not an appropriate and final solution. So I do believe that we need multilateral efforts to tackle difficulties in order to make better circumstances for those who live in the epicenter of armed conflict situation like Afghanistan, Syria, and any other countries like Iraq. You cannot change the world all alone. My recommendation is to work closely and honestly with each other, civil society activists of those conflict countries and international community. With curiosity, human rights defenders and many civil society activists are really keen to be a part of international dialogue and decision-making process. If you trust us and give us an opportunity, we really want to work with you to prove our commitment about human rights, democracy, and integrating refugees into the host society. Thank you very much.
L'Afghanistan est malheureusement.
Unfortunately, Afghanistan is symbolic of European policy, particularly given the various battles being fought. The member states are fighting to try to make things safe, but we need to turn things around, turn the questions on their end, ask the Afghan government to accept their nationals back before the country could be rebuilt, but at the same time, through financing the reconstruction of the country, we should insist that 85,000 Afghans, if I recall the figure correctly, well, it's horrific, really. That's really a battle we've been fighting alongside you in this House, together with local NGOs working on that. Unfortunately, this is a typical case of how Europe tries to externalize its foreign policy and asylum policy, challenging the Geneva Convention within the EU. I'll hand over straight away now then to Spuni Chambaki, who's going to speak on behalf of the European Network of Migrant Women.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Spogme Jabarkhil. I'm representing the European Network of Migrant Women. Anna Zubnina was supposed to talk, but I got the chance to talk behind Afghan Women Organization and European Network of Migrant Women. We have 55 member organization in 20 countries and office here in Brussels. And all our members are people who work with migrants, women, and refugee women. Before I speak on our good experience from Sweden, I will say I'm very delighted to be a part of this amazing event. And it's very encouraging to see this refugee organization and refugee advocate at this important place where decisions are taken that directly affect their lives and future. I wish to thank from the deep of my heart all those who have been behind the providing us this platform today, where we can bring our issues and we can bring our solution to the migrant parliament. As any other countries, so Sweden have also a very big, higher numbers of refugees. We're facing a very big problem, consolation for refugees in Sweden. It is a labor marketing. It's about language. Women who have been in Sweden 30 years without can speak Swedish. And this is the bad integration for being a woman in Sweden with refugee background. If you meet every time like women's 20-year or 25-year, we need a stronger woman integration in all EU countries, not only Sweden, because this is facing maybe a lot of people where I have my colleagues here facing the same problem in other countries. The main problem have been forced deportation to the countries where there is war, and undocumented women and girls who have been forced to take a part in the prostitution because of undocumented and not paper, and they are being a part of human trafficking all over the EU. And this is something we all have, as I mentioned, we all organizations have to work against that and have to work as the EU Parliament how to take care of those women. Women are particularly sending with force. And this is integration, the first problem we have in Sweden, in many countries, that women are stimulated, women are not allowed to take a part of European associations. Lots of women are behind the doors, even here in Europe. A lot of refugee women who are under the violence, who are struggling to go far away in their lives. So my suggestion or my hope from the EU Parliament migrant is to have a strong integration in all EU countries for those women with refugee background, because if we do not do that today, we will face a very big problem in 10 years and 5 years. And this will say the children in next generation, our girls in next generation will learn to accept the violence from their parents, the violence from their culture, the violence from their people. And this is not acceptable. We have to be better and better to integrate our men and women to new countries. Thank you so much.
Merci tout particulièrement pour votre respect du temps.
Well, thank you very much for keeping to the time. I will be somewhat provocative and say that women are often more respectful of the timing. And I think, as you say, the women are victims 2 times over, because they're also victims in their status as women during the migratory process, when they arrive, indeed, they are even within their communities victimized. So that's a problem. So we do have to make special cause for women in the legislation, because they are very much under pressure from all sides. So I believe that that is very much something which the women's movement is involved in. Thank you. Well, I'm now going to give the floor to Yunus Muhammadi from the Greek Forum of Refugees. And of course we have Mrs. Kuneva here with us this morning, who is representing Greece also. And then also someone representing Germany. Go ahead, please.
I will speak in my second homeland language, Greek language, so please put your mics.
I am particularly pleased to be here this morning on the subject of migrants and refugees. It's a very important subject, and many efforts have been made to solve the problems, but unfortunately not in the European institutions. Often there are individuals trying to achieve something, but it's very, very important that it be organised on a community-wide basis. I would like to thank you and say that I'm particularly happy that there is also a fellow combatant from Greece here, Mrs. Kuneva, who's been very active in defending the rights of workers and in combating the injustice against workers. And Mrs. Kuneva has certainly made a very important step forward on behalf of all of us workers. I'd also like to particularly thank the Parliamentary Party of the Left for organising and participating in this initiative. I think it's a very important step. And I would like to thank all the communities who are here representing the various activists. And we have a representation of many countries, Norway, Austria, and many other countries. It's very encouraging, therefore, to see that day after day there is a lot of goodwill to contribute on the part of European citizens in this effort. Well, I'm going to be rather brief. I don't want to take up too much time. The title of this panel is the European Responsibility, Challenging European Responsibility. And of course we have to ask ourselves why there are migrants. And the help or the support that has been given by European governments to those in the various countries which have the problems, and therefore there is a responsibility there. The European Union has to try in a bilateral way or through agreements. It has to try to deal with the countries which are the source of migration and refugees. We have to look at access to Europe, and one of the big values of Europe is the fact that human rights should be respected in Europe. And Europe has been built on those values. But unfortunately, accessibility on the part of refugees to the protection of those rights has been restricted. They have to have access to the asylum system. it would be wonderful if there were a very sure and protected route to these protections. And we are all here in this room, and as far as I know, in another room there's a debate going on about Frontex and the tasks or competences which they must have, and what they're doing with Libya, with Turkey and other countries, in cooperation with those countries. So that's disappointing that such a subject is being tackled for Frontex. In 2015, there was a focus on the refugee crisis, but really the refugee crisis is in places like Jordan or Turkey rather than Europe. And if you look at what they are doing from an economic point of view, or the problems that they have, that's where we have the crisis, not in Europe. We know that the ratio of refugees in the general population is much higher in those countries such as Jordan than it is in Europe. So we know that the figures of refugees, the number of refugees in those countries, is much higher than the official figures. Every country seems to be trying to pass the buck and try to pass on the problems to another country. And the situation seems to be endless. However, I would now like to talk a little bit about some of the positive decisions that have been taken. For example, relocation. Well, this is a good step forward. It has begun in Europe, but in order to implement it, we only have at the moment one country, Malta, which is actually implementing this system. And I'd like also to say that there is a lack of solidarity. It's very disappointing in some countries, Hungary, for example, where if you help refugees, you can go to prison, or in Italy, where recently a mayor was arrested. And we do have similar problems in Greece too, in the Aegean islands. So this is very disappointing. And what I would like to say is that we, the communities of migrants and refugees, and as members of the European community, we have to understand that we have a responsibility to meet in this continent. It's one of our responsibilities, and I think you recognise that we are striving and we want to be on the same frequency or wavelength as the local communities on this. We now have the European elections upcoming, so this is an opportunity to have information and to transmit information so that we can combat the far right. So we have to remember that we all have responsibility. Thank you very much for your attention, and sorry if I took up too much time. Thank you.
Vous avez bien raison.
You're right to speak out against that particular matter and what's happening with the MFF. So 30 billion will be available for Frontex for the 7 years of the upcoming MFF. So we're going to go from 1,500 to 10,000. One of the main concerns that governments has is to get Frontex to deal with returns. Because if Frontex does the dirty work of returns, it will be less visible. No, you're right. This isn't necessarily a refugee crisis. Some call it a crisis of refugees and migrants. But actually the crisis is in the hosting. The crisis has been in the EU's hosting of the migrants and refugees. 85% of the refugees are being hosted in developing states. So we're not taking on this burden alone. So there's a crisis of solidarity in the EU. There are 2 million refugees who came to Europe between 2015 and 2017. Half of that 2 million went to Germany. I'm not Mrs. Merkel's biggest fan. We see the problems that exist today in Germany. But if we had greater European solidarity, we wouldn't be facing the situation of today. And Barbara, I'm sure Italy wouldn't be in the situation it is today if there had been greater solidarity towards Italy. Now we will hand over to another speaker, another woman who will be talking about the next matter. Jane, over to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I want to take the opportunity to thank the organizers of this event, especially the Lampedusa group and the left-wing group, from the left-wing politicians from Berlin, from Hamburg. I am from a group called International Women's Space, which started at the Oranienplatz movement in 2012. And we are a group of feminist political women who are fighting against racism, sexism, and other intersecting power structures. And I am also honored to be in a group of people who have been dehumanized in many ways. Their efforts to deconstruct a narrative by Europeans that we are a liability. We are here to live on their social systems. We are here and we are lazy is confronted today in many ways. It's empowering to know that we are working for our visibility and we are writing our own narratives. And on the topic of writing, I'm going to say one of the topics that we take very seriously is documentation. And in 2015, we came up with our first publication, which is in our own words. It's about the stories of refugee women. Our second publication will be done on the November 25th, the Day Against Violence on Women. Last year, we did a conference when I came to Germany, which had 6 panels, and we tried to look at all the fronts where migration is not covered. I am going to give a very short summary of the topics we did yesterday regarding women issues. And the refugee crisis is a crisis of patriarchal system in which women and girls are disproportionately affected in this system. They flee the countries affected by the harmful European interventions, as well as the violence perpetuated by their male partners and members of the family. In Europe, migrant women's rights are entrenched in CEDAW and the Istanbul Convention without bias to their ethnic, legal, migratory status. Articles 59 and 61 of the Convention recognizes gender-based violence as grounds for asylum, and this right should be respected by all EU states. In all migration and integration policies, women and children must be treated as different categories. Women's rights should be respected not because they are mothers or daughters, but because they are human beings born equal and free. It is crucial that migrant women are afforded resources and spaces to self-organize in order to resist male violence at all levels of society, be leaders in political processes, and shape decisions that impact their lives. And as we take the fight against racism and sexism and fascism, the fight on patriarchy should also be part of these statements. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being so concise. When you took the floor, you spoke about the fight against prejudice. Indeed, that's one of the areas where we have to constantly break down stereotypes. When migrants arrive, they have to get training. But actually, I would say migrants have a lot more diplomas and more training than many Europeans. Some migrants do need training, but I wouldn't say that migrants suffer from a lack of training. No, they provide a social contribution to our aging Europe. That's because many of the arrivals are younger than Europeans, so they cost the social security systems less. So these arrivals are willing to work, they're less likely to fall ill than Europeans, they cost the social security system less. So there are these cliches that we've got to keep breaking down. And of course, among the migrant communities, there are more and more women migrants. If you look at the statistics, women are in the majority, and women are actually particularly well trained, particularly well qualified. That's exactly why they've been able to up and leave. Now, thank you for your statements. I think that was really important. So looking at migrant issues, but also women's migrant issues, I think there's a great deal of work to be done there. Now, I'll hand over to Mr. Jakub Kibeda, who is the spokesperson talking about the work that was done yesterday. So some of you were involved in work yesterday. It's the work on the draft resolution. There were two rapporteurs, if I'm not wrong. So I think your co-rapporteur is just putting the finishing touches to the resolution. So I hope that some reference will be made to her. But I'll hand over to you. And as I say, I really like the resolution you've drawn up, even though I haven't written it myself.
Good morning. It's a huge task that the group gave me today to talk about the resolution, our hard work we have done. We try to give all the voices of migrants and refugees challenges and problems in this document, in this resolution. I am from Italy, so for myself, I need a resolution by myself for what's happening in Italy, because I think what's going on in Italy a case to be studied, and I don't want to talk too much about it, but yesterday a Gambian asylum seeker committed suicide because they said to him, from today you are illegal, and nobody is illegal. Really, also previous speakers, I was really want to hear from Suleiman from the agricultural project that how many agricultural migrant workers committed suicide in the agriculture camps, and the situation to give a more clear situation about what's going on there. We are self-organized migrants and refugees. This is the final resolution of the first refugee parliament, 2018. in the European Parliament. We gather our diversity and decide to work together to face the challenging and critical situation we are all experiencing. Far-right swing actors acting more and more aggressive. There is a lot of violence against migrants and racism, hatred crimes, on the, also the institutional and in the individual level. We are facing death and human rights abuses at the borders of Europe and in Europe itself. We are committed to raise our voices, to be protagonists to our lives. We remind EU members, states and Parliament that fundamental rights are not respected when it comes to dealing with refugees and migrants issues. Politicians using hard languages and policies that are criminalizing refugees and migrants and asylum seekers and consider them as enemies. Pushback policies in the asylum and migration produced death. More than 60,000 people died in the Mediterranean Sea, and in the 10 past years, more than that in the desert. More invisible persons are contracted international law. Abuses against migrants and refugee women are increasing due to lack of social security plans. Detention centers, transit camps, and hotspots are violating human rights. The refugee crisis is the crisis of patriarchal system in which women and girls are disproportionately affected. In this system, they flee the countries affected by the harmful European interventions, as well as the violence perpetuated by their male partners and members of families. Undocumented status of women plays a major role of facilitating male violence. Women without papers cannot denounce their aggressors out of fear of to be deported. Additionally, the demand-driven market of prostitution push more and more women in the hands of traffickers. In Italy alone, there has been 10 times increase in sex trafficking in women. Most of women are 13 to 16 years, women and girls. Female victims of trafficking in human beings receive no adequate support. Deportation to insecure countries such as Afghanistan, where there has been continuous war for more than 3 decades. According to the recent UN report, during the last 4 years, there had been 40,000 casualties in the country. There is no secure places in Afghanistan. Most of the Hazara, for example, asylum seekers are being sent to central Afghanistan because of ill-conceived conclusion that their region is secure and safe. As far as we know, amount of money that has been given to the government, Afghan government, has been spent on returning refugees. But it has been spent on returning refugees. Root causes Most of migrants and refugees are forced to leave their homes. Routes of this forced departure must be overcome. These routes are wars, EU weapons also, misery, poverty, and EU trade policies are part of these causes. Our demands, no forced deportation. Any deportation that put life or dignity at risk must be stopped. Any EU or bilateral agreement and deals and memorandums of understanding facilitating deportation must be cancelled, and notion of safe country doesn't take into account our rights and realities. Freedom of movement. We will not negotiate our rights of movement. De facto, European citizens benefit from it. We want to be equal. Equal rights, access to labour market in the EU. Drop Dublin regulation. We claim for the satisfaction of our social rights, but also for the population. We claim against work exploitation. The regulation of undocumented migrants across Europe is a first and necessary step. We especially highlight the rights of women that are violated by patriarchal practice. The EU institutions and member states respect laws, human rights laws, international treaties and conventions when it comes to refugees and asylum seeker issues. Funding for refugees and migrants communities, organizations, media shall be provided by the EU and member states. That the EU and member states stop selling arms to underdeveloped countries. Instead, we urge them to help to bring forward cooperation and long-lasting development programs. Social rights for all, health, education, housing, have to be guaranteed to everyone. It is crucial that migrant women are afforded resources and spaces to self-organize in order to resist male violence at all levels of the society, be leaders in political process, and shape decisions that impact their lives. We have to support these notions. We demand to be included in policy making when it concerns our lives. Participation, no policy about us without us. In Europe, migrants' women's rights are entrenched and in the Istanbul Convention without BS2 their ethnic legal migratory status. Article 59/61 of the Convention recognized gender-based violence as grounds for asylum, and this right should be respected by the EU states. In all migration and integration policies, women and children must be treated as different categories. Women's rights should be respected, not because they are mothers or daughters, but because they are human beings born equal and free. We want the European Union to end its agreement and protocols with Afghan government in sending Afghan refugees to Afghanistan. The Afghan government was forced to sign an agreement with the EU. Exchange for economical aid is to be spent on areas to receive the refugees. This agreement should be annulled because of majority of the Afghan refugees are Hazara and the Kabul government on an ethnic decision claim their region is safe. Creating this space, we are here today. This space should be also finance refugees and migrant parliament movement. In the end of the day, we will submit this resolution, and thank you very much.
Yaqub, thank you so much. I'm just saying that Afghan refugees, not only Hazaras, we have Pashtuns, Tajiks, Uzbeks, Balochs, Hindus. We have a lots of refugees from Afghanistan everywhere. And this is a security problem for every Afghan in Afghanistan. Of course, more for Hazara brothers and sisters, but we have a problem and security problem for all the Afghan nation right now. Women, men, children. Thank you.
Si je peux me permettre d'interférer.
If I may interfere, just coming in here, beyond the question of the different Afghan communities, unfortunately, it's not just in Afghanistan that there are negotiations of this type underway. I'm discovering that Mr. Salagosh, who's the person in charge of the secret services in Sudan, is paying a visit to France. And we all know the kinds of things he's going to be negotiating on. It goes far beyond Afghanistan, but in Sudan and many other countries throughout the world, you, of course, are free to choose what you want to do, but just to share my opinion on the subject for what it's worth. Given the tension between France and Sudan, I think it's a worldwide problem in dealing with certain countries. I take your point. There are many Afghans here in the room, and I fully understand your concerns, absolutely. But you're in a parliament here for all refugees and migrants, and maybe you can extend your focus beyond just Afghanistan. I'm abusing my position from my vantage point as chairman. We have about a half an hour for an open debate, a bit less because at 1:30 we'll lose our interpreters. Oh no, until 1, is it? Well, 1:45 we have a photo. So 12:45 for the interpreters then. Thank you.
Okay. Actually, in our demands, we asked to drop all EU bilateral agreement and deals and memorandum of understanding for deportation must be cancelled. We demand this. But we stress on Afghanistan issue because now there are more being sent back than the others.
Alors, je vais prendre un tour de parole.
I'll take speakers one by one. I'll try to do the best job I can.
The end, and Connie, if you want, it's me, it's the president of the panel. Thank you very much. Je vais essayer pour éviter.
I'm going to try to take them in order. I don't know who you are. I'll start with you over there, madam.
السلام عليكم. حدث بالعربية. أردت أن أشرك تجربة مالطا.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to share my own experience in Malta, my experience as a refugee in Malta. I don't think we've necessarily put enough pressure on. In Malta there are various nationalities represented. We managed to change the attitude of one of the parties in power. In fact, we got the Labour Party in office, replacing the National Maltese Party. It wasn't necessarily us behind this change, but we all decided that we would vote for the Labour Party in Malta. So that was one card that we were able to play. That made it possible to end the large-scale deportations and returns. So that was how we managed to succeed.
Attendez 2 minutes. J'ai dit que je faisais comme ça.
I said I would go like that, going round, one man, one woman each time. So we're going to do the second row.
Very much, Madam. I am Akram Gizabi of the World Hazara Council. We try to include the word Hazara here, and the lady there objected that it's not only the Hazaras that are refugees, they are Pashtuns, Balochis, and Tajiks, and so on. But she forgets to know that the majority of the Afghan refugees in Europe are Hazaras. The majority are Hazaras. One. Secondly, the Afghan government is discriminating openly against Hazaras. So these people are one way or the other forced out of Afghanistan to come to Europe, and Mr. Ghani comes to Europe and writes an agreement with the European Union claiming that the central part of Afghanistan where the Hazaras live, it's safe. Therefore, in exchange for the money the European Union offered him, he said, yes, please send all these people, their place is safe. Our place, according to him, one time in his campaign for presidency, he said that he addressed the Hazaras. He said, if you give me 2 votes, okay, if you give me 2 votes, I'm going to break, I don't care how many votes you give me, I'm going to break the central prison. According to him, even, central part of Afghanistan is a huge prison. Yes, it is safe, but so is prison. Prison is also safe. Once we get out of it, we are cut. So, yes, for 2 reasons. The majority of the people are Hazaras, lady. That's why we talk of Hazaras. The majority of the people kicked out of Iran are Hazaras, not Pashtuns.
Je crois qu'on a bien compris. Hein?
Okay, I think we get the message. Thank you. Let me just say it again. This is a resolution which applies to all migrants and refugees in all concerned countries. Well, let's not try to just have a debate about Afghanistan. Sorry, but we just don't have that much time, so I really hope that everyone can take the floor. The lady in blue.
Hi, I'm Manal Tahan. I'm Syria.
No, madame.
Okay.
Merci.
سلام علیکم. من می‌خواستم یک سوال پرسیدم کنم. این است که
I wanted to ask this question. Everything was written, all the resolution for the betterment of the refugees and every day for improving their lives of the refugees, but for every policy. For this reason, this European Parliament cannot implement the Geneva Convention because all the refugees have because of the because it is in 1951. If it is because on all these years in the lives of the refugees there are things that they were not there then, and that's why if we change that definitely it could be a positive thing for the refugees, for their plight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman.
اوكي سيداتي سادتي اود ان اتكلم باللغه العربيه.
Yes, I'll be speaking in Arabic if that's okay. Good afternoon. Salam alaikum. I'll be very brief, I can assure you. We realize the importance of the way the extreme right in Europe is expressing itself. In my country of residence, Austria, it's certainly reality, and that has been the situation since 2015. And this has had a very negative effect on the rest of Europe. And we, people who have come to reside in those countries, who have learnt the language, we've integrated, we're part of the job market. To new migrants, I would say to them that the extreme right is preaching hate and discrimination, and the extreme right therefore has played a very strong role in order to get into the highest echelons of power in Europe. And that's very important. It's a problem that we have and we must combat, so that we have a voice in all these issues. Now,
I'd also like to speak in German. Very briefly, I'd like to say that we as migrants are not always refugees. Migrants are the new arrivals coming to Europe. But we are part of society. That's what we want to be. We want to be part of here. We don't want to be guests. We want to stay here. And ultimately, I think it's terribly important to draw up a plan as to what we can do. Sorry, says the chairman, no, we have to give the floor to everybody.
Thank you very much. The discussion was really fruitful, and I think this is really good that we are all getting together here to discuss the immigrants and refugees overall problem across Europe. My name is Razia, from female fellow from Germany, originally from Afghanistan, of course. We discussed a lot about stopping deportation, cancelling bilateral or multilateral agreements, treatments with the countries like Afghanistan or Nigeria or other countries in Africa. But there is one of the things that Madam MP also said, that we are doing this, we are cancelling this agreement, or we are doing these agreements and sending the people because these countries like Afghanistan, they should take care of their people. They should build their country. We want to have a secure country, a secure Afghanistan. Because of that, we are doing this financial support. But we have to remember that we are giving this support to these countries, we want to build Afghanistan, not because of these people, because they are coming here, we are sending. It's responsibility of Europe and other countries who are member of the UN, they should support a fragile state for not being collapsed. If it collapsed, then it creates a problem for overall, for the world community. So you are getting support, you are doing these agreements to the fragile, conflict-affected countries. It's a responsibility to world community, to other countries. So the immigrants who are here,
if we have already discussed that do not decide on us without us. So involve us. The immigrants who are here, you should not make another agreement to sending them back to Afghanistan. We appreciate your support to Afghanistan, but not on the fate of these immigrants who are here. They should be safe and also support Afghanistan's future. Thank you.
Well, I have a comment to make. We don't sign in the Parliament here, and in particular in the case of Afghanistan, we are to a certain extent dependent on the member states. So we have to be clear about the responsibilities, and it's the member states who are responsible. We have agreements, informal agreements, that haven't been signed, and therefore it's not possible to intervene under the terms of the treaty at European level. So I want to be very clean about this. I'm not personally signing anything on these agreements.
Illegal. It is illegal.
Microphone for the speaker. Well, the Court of Justice has in some way validated these practices, for example with Turkey, but it's coming under foreign affairs policy, and this is the purview of the member states first and foremost. I'm looking for a woman now to give the floor to.
I will speak in Arabic. رح أتحدث اللغة العربية. أنا منال.
I'll speak Arabic. My name is Manal. I'm Syrian but residing in Denmark. I'm sure you're aware of the scale of racism in Denmark. Since 2015, benefits and welfare for migrants have gone down. We're living under the poverty line, in fact. We can't even make ends meet. We can't pay the rent or food. This is what we were able to do before the war. Why did we come to Europe? To seek out peace and to consolidate a future for ourselves and our children. We're not here for health reasons. We're not here for fun. There are violations of law which I completely don't understand. Family reunification and temporary protection. I can't bring my children over for 3 years. I myself put in a request for political asylum, but my children were back in Damas. They were threatened, and I had to bring them over illegally. I had to. So they came by sea. They were on makeshift boats, and the boat suffered an accident. Half of those on board this makeshift vessel, half of them died. For 10 days I had no idea what happened to my children. Just imagine a mother who doesn't know what's happened to her children for 10 days. But nobody cares about us at all. I had to be admitted to hospital, and nobody, no NGO, no person, no organisation came to support me. I was waiting for any kind of news about my children. It turned out that a fisherman had found out about my children, but then my children had been thrown into prison in Turkey. So prison cells were where my children had been put. My child was there in sopping wet clothes. He was only 10 years old. How is that acceptable? How? And then you think about all the money that Turkey swallows up from us, and Turkey doesn't even give children dry clothes when they've been saved from the sea. Finally, my children were able to get in contact with me via Facebook. My children had lost everything, including their mobile phones. It was one of the prison guards who managed to get a message to me because they felt sorry for me. But for 10 days I had no idea what had happened to my young children. On 2 occasions, my children tried to flee Turkey to get to Greece. I did absolutely everything in my power. I left no stone unturned to get in touch with my children. When my children got to Greece, someone managed to provide support. I spoke with the immigration authorities. I didn't want asylum at that point. I just wanted to die. I was told that you don't have a residence. This can't go on. I was shown photos of cadavers. A child that looked like my own son. I went to the immigration services and they refused to provide me any kind of support. For me, this is a question of basic humanity. My children now haven't had any access to psychological treatment. They continue to suffer. I can tell you that there is a document by the CHR, and I hope that the members of the European Parliament will be able to look at that documentary because it will affect you, it will stir emotions in you. We need to come up with some kind of solution. As a mother, I can talk about integration, I can talk about many things, but my own lawyer is now being called into question. But all of this was to escape a war. We're psychologically broken down, and every day we're exposed to threats. My children were threatened every day in Damas, and now we're being told to integrate. Well, how can we achieve our goals? How can we learn? How can we go to school? But, wow.
Yes, I understand very much. I let you speak for 5 minutes. I very much understand your story. Unfortunately, I'm keeping time here, and I understand the message you're conveying. Each and every one of us, I think, feel for what you've said, which really resonates with us. I say it often, I'm sometimes ashamed to be an American and even to be European, but even more so to be French, which is supposed to be the homeland of human rights. Yes, go ahead.
Oui, c'est juste.
Just to add a very strongly worded message saying to the left, please keep up the fight and get to the politicians to ensure that migrants who do come, including the Central African Republic and Congo-Brazzaville, where there are problems, when they come here and pull out the red carpet, as the case for Cameroon, where there are problems, if you give them the red carpet treatment, well, push them away because they are the root cause of the suffering of young Congolese people and the misery of Africans. Support young people more. Support democracy. We need to strengthen democracy because that will ease the burden of the peoples. If people can participate in shaping their own lives and fighting for their country, then things will start going better. These are the things that need to happen, and the left are very much sensitive to our efforts. We were disappointed when the French president made a statement. First, we were happy when he said that he would come and he wouldn't go along with the presidents who wanted to change the constitution. But of course, he doesn't go beyond lip service, using Congolese money. And then when people come, they're all happy. But all the people who come in en masse, leaving the country, are not welcomed. So we want the left to convey that message because that is what is killing Africa. Don't say we want the left to continue to support us. I mean, we all, I constantly denounce Franco-African relations. I have no problem there, but I don't feel represented by a left that has lost its moral guidance. Madam, over to you.
Muchas gracias. Voy a hablar.
Thank you. I'll speak in Spanish. My name is Maria Esther González. I'm here on behalf of the Pro-Venezuela Germany organization, the Hamburg section. Thank you to Lampedusa and the Linke Party for allowing me to participate today. I'm here to say the following. We're connected with the groups representing all Venezuelan people in Europe. We need to fight for a better Europe with greater solidarity and which is willing to improve the rights of all human beings, regardless of their sex, colour of skin, political orientation, place of birth, sexual orientation, or whether they are with a disability or not. Refugees and migrants are here in Europe because their home countries grapple with many problems. Venezuela is a very serious problem in South America. Some 5,000 people flee every day. Countries in the surrounding region are doing all they can to deal with the situation, in particular Colombia. Today there are some 800,000 people in Colombia or going through, but Peru, Brazil and other countries. The UNHCR, the UN agency, has said that in 2015 Venezuela was the country with the fourth biggest of migrant flows after Syria, Afghanistan and Iraq. It's believed that 7 to 10% of the population of Venezuela is fleeing and is on the move. Some of these people come to Europe, mostly Spain, Italy and France, but Germany, Holland, Belgium, France, Hungary. We want to make a plea. Please do draw to a conclusion. We want to launch an appeal. We want to launch an appeal to the European institutions, to Europe. Those who are fleeing lack of healthcare services, they need to be welcomed here. The Parliament needs to help us, but not just that. Okay, thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Abdul Azim Azad. I am a speaker of Afghan refugees in Belgium and, of course, member of the coordination of persons without paper in Belgium. My shortly form will go about in the first panel and second panel from the speakers. We much have known the present situation of security in Afghanistan, and I think the best privilege and honor to be respected is to be given for the National Army of Afghanistan, who are in the front line, and they are and the NATO and American forces have handled the security issue to the National Army. And I just want to talk briefly over causing the Economic and Social Committee of Europe, because there was a meeting and a forum in the 6th and 7th March this year, where much of the people has been participating to show the good role of immigration and refugees in an economic sense in Belgium. And I want to just give a push, I can say, or a request that if any kind of proposition will be delivered to the next session, that the good role of the refugee and immigrants could be facing a good economy in Europe and in Belgium. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. The gentleman here. Go on.
Thank you. My name is Asukuo Odo from Nigeria. And I want to make a suggestion here in regards to the resolution read and tendered to this panel. And I realized something, that this makes me fourth time coming to Brussels for some purposes of refugee migrants problem in Europe. And it's unfortunate up to today, and all the cry, the challenges fell into deaf ears. I want to suggest that in this resolution, should this room here should make a very strong position to make sure that refugee migrant parliament should be international and should pass all the information to the people that are concerned, more especially the big players. This resolution should reach them and be read for the whole world to know. That is number one. Number two, and I would like also for this group or the players to make sure that we create at least number of people to approach these people physically. Even Donald Trump, who caused the most dangerous situation in the world today, should be approached and cautioned and advise him on what to do and how to do it. And that is why he gave so many dangerous decisions to so many European countries today. And crises are taken radically. Therefore, we should make sure that this parliament should be recognized and make it international. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. The next speaker.
Danke schön nochmal, dass ich eine Chance bekomme.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity once again.
ما از کشور اتریش میگم چیزی که خیلی مهم هست در ماهده 1951 قانون
important for this commission. Unfortunately, the reconciliation of 2015 in Austria they have added a third article that for 3 years the Afghan will not be included, then they can take another decision. The other which is important is the election in Austria. The racists used refugees so that they can get victory in election. But the European countries, especially Austria, should remember that since 1992, 99,000 have claimed asylum, and so many thousand were accepted as refugees, and after 6 years they became citizens of Austria. But there are the issue of Afghan women in Austria, and they've created a law for them to integrate into the community.
Unfortunately, it's not fair to make these cuts. Thank you.
Madam. Thank you very much. Madam, you're next.
My name is Sofia. I'm Portuguese. I live in Hamburg, and I'm here with the Lampedusa group. And I would like to launch a question about the law in what concerns asylum of refugees in Europe, because I think it's also a problem of law. Once that refugees that come from countries in war, they have a status in the asylum in Europe, and other refugees that come from other countries, when they are escaping from non-dignifying conditions of life, they arrive here and the law don't recognize them, and therefore they have no documents and they cannot proceed with their lives. So I would like to launch an appeal here in the Parliament, which is a reviewing of the law considering the asylum of refugees. And that's it. Thanks.
Je crois que c'est intégré dans le projet de résolution.
I think it's included in the draft resolution. Over the gentleman here, then over there. Yes, you, then you, and that's it then.
Tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really quite pleased to be here to seize this opportunity to stress something that I think is very important for all of us. We act as an international coalition of the undocumented migrants, but back in 2014 we had a big demonstration in front of the European Parliament denouncing the European Union's hypocrisy. And Italy, which seemed to be the gateway to Europe, but everybody entering onto Italian territory was to be granted asylum by producing a document. But all of these people had to be processed, and we had to determine whether they could work and be absorbed by the European Union as a whole. And we weren't happy that that wasn't considered more. Today the situation has changed and the political tendency has changed in Italy entirely. Things are taking a turn, and in several days' time Europe is going to be invaded by the kind of people who tell us to leave Italy to end up in Germany or Belgium or other European countries, because Italian policy is governed by the far right, and we are the people asking for the residence permits and asylum seekers in Italy, and we need humanitarian reactions. But today there is no humanitarianism. Just last week, since last week, all of those leaving to extend their residence permit, they're asked what type of residence permit is it? Humanitarian reasons? No renewal. Those that have asked it for some time and are waiting for a response to get their residence permit, when they arrive, they check online, and the residence permit is ready online. But when they get to the office, they're told no, they're turned away. But there are others that need to speak, sorry, of course. But that's a situation that we need to realize that we're denouncing back in 2014. And now Italy isn't even able to determine what status to give to those who already had received the humanitarian residence permit.
Yeah. Please, Arabic language, please, let translate it correctly, please. السؤال المطروح كالآتي: من أين أتت هذه الحكومات الأوروبية اليمينية المتطرفة؟
Okay then. I have a question I'd like to put to you. Where are these populist governments coming from? These populist governments are voted in by the European people, and that's the way it is. We've got to accept that. These extremist and populist governments are working against humanitarian issues. But there's one thing they share, well, more than one thing: Islamophobia, racism, xenophobia, and they're having an impact on refugees and humanity. You in GUI, why aren't you really standing up for freedom, for humanity, and for a common world together, built on the bedrock of peace? But we see these populist governments are at the very heart of Europe. They reflect the way Europe is, whether we like it or not. And they are the ones who have got decision-making powers now. And you are on the side of humanity, but you just constitute a small minority. Why don't we mobilize so that we can live together in peace? I mean, we don't like Europe all that much. You are also involved in war and destruction. That violates all of humanity's principles. You as a group, you as a left-leaning party and group, you ought to look at these governments and bring us back to humanity and freedom.
hope you understand.
It's impossible. Madam.
I would like to first of all...
Put your microphone on, please. Microphone.
I would like to first of all thank all the refugees and migrants who have gathered here and organizing for equality, dignity, power and justice. I think it's very important that we continue this movement, of organization, in participating in the public and political life here in Europe. Mobility and migration is like a normal reality. And if we look at history, Europeans have migrated for economic reasons, for political persecution, or for other reasons, conflict, whatever. But today, particularly refugees of African descent are being labeled and criminalized as economic migrants. I would like to remind that we are here today, 2018, part of the declaration of the UN, the Decade for People of African Descent. And it's very, very, very sad that we continue to observe increasing cases of racial discrimination, of violence, particularly against refugees and migrants of African descent. We experience this in Europe. The racism is also deeply entrenched in the institutions, in particularly by the police. And we have examples in cases such as Adam Traoré in France, Uri Jallo in Germany, an asylum seeker who died in police custody in Dessau in 2005. We have increasing concerns about the racial bias, the arrests, the ill treatments of the police and institutions, the use of physical restraints, racial profiling.
S'il vous plaît.
And we demand that the EU, member states and its institutions must intensify the attempts to fight racism. Europe is a continent with a long and troubled history of policing people of color. And every Western European country has blood of our ancestors on its hands. And a first step is in recognizing...
I can't continue. Sorry. Monsieur?
Gentlemen?
Hello. Hello, my greetings to everyone. My name is Shaban from the group Lampedusa in Hamburg. I also like to talk about, because it's like we don't know where we stand from the view of the policy of the parliament, the Western powers and the leaders. We are talking about a lot of refugees and a lot of terrorists, what is happening in Afghanistan and Africa and so on and so forth. But we don't know how we never talk about how it costs, what brings this war and what makes the refugees flee from their own country to Europe. I think this is most of the question that most of the parliament don't want to be here. I want to take this opportunity to talk about a few stories that I faced in my experience. About 4 years ago, there is a woman who helped me with solidarity in her house, and she has a friend from Germany who is having a company in Nigeria, working in Nigeria. So one thing, I'm also a Muslim, not only a black man. And this man just saw me, I feel like a racist or something like that, doesn't like it. So he questioned me, what is happening in Nigeria? Why are people killing in the name of Islam? So in where I grow in Africa, you don't need to ask me a question that I don't know about. So I have to know the reason why you ask me this question. I asked him back, why are you asking me? He said, you just need the name of those terrorist groups from me. I tell him no. And he later told me that this is Boko Haram. I said, I know the name. He said, why didn't I tell him? I tell him, okay. if I will answer you the reason why they are killing in the name of Islam, I need to ask you a question first. This man, he said, okay, he's ready for this question. And then he said to me, I asked him, which African country can make their own car or weapon? He said none. And I asked him, okay, Boko Haram has a lot of weapons, muak, and everything to make war. But who is giving them? That is something that we should know. Because the weapon is made in Germany, Italy, Russia, America, and so on and so forth. It's like a business that they are using our life to do. That is what we want to know. And this must stop. We are human beings, we are not animals. You cannot, every time we are creating weapons just in the name of human being to kill.
Thank you.
This must stop.
And the last one.
مرحبا خالد قباقيبي من سوريا من دمشق. أولا أحب أن أشكر الأستاذ علي على.
I'm from Damascus, from Syria. Thank you to Mr. Ali for what he said. I think he summed it up really well. It was great. Then it goes without saying that nobody leaves their own house, their own country. No one takes exile, takes to the high seas. No one does that of their own free will. No. Of course, it would be better to keep the Syrian refugees in Europe. It doesn't make sense to force them to go back to Syria. They should only go back to Syria when that country enjoys peace. And back in 1947, we opened up our houses to Palestinian refugees. We opened up our houses, we opened up our wallets. Why don't you do the same?
Donc je donne la parole à ma collègue.
I'll hand over to Mrs. Kunova, my colleague.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I don't want to take time away from the other speakers, but I would like to say that I'm especially pleased about this event today. I'd like to thank my colleagues for organising it, and I would like to thank all of you who have participated. You've expressed your feelings to us so that we can be motivated and to hear what you're saying and hear what you think, and we keep them with us in the future. And this is very important for us in our work. Second point, I also am a migrant. I'm perhaps the only migrant in the European Parliament, and I don't like to hear the illegal migrant. What does illegal arms mean, or illegal trade? What does that mean? When we have an arms trade which is partly produced by our contributions, our money that we pay, how is it that the arms trade has gone up by 60% on a worldwide basis, whereas people are suffering in Africa and elsewhere? And they continue to increase the financing for the production of arms, and they're happy when they sign a new agreement about arms trade. This is a subject we have to fight. They don't think, they don't see, because they have their life and their house, and they're just considering all this as something in the news. So it's very important for us that you have spoken today, and we have to work towards peace, because very few people are using their voice, taking the floor, taking the microphone to denounce the arms trade and to say that we want world peace. Thank you.
Merci, pardon. Je suis préoccupée par la.
I'm concerned because we're almost at the end. I can give you the floor again for 1 minute because you're the spokesperson on behalf of the declaration. So over to you for 1 minute.
Okay, before I want to thank informally Sebastian, who do a hard job yesterday.
ما سبستيان تشکر میکنم که بسیار زحمت کشیدند دیشب.
About this resolution. Thank you, Sebastian. I want to applaud everybody. And I want to remind that we are not anti-institution. We are here, we are integrated, we are beautiful, and you see we speak all the languages of EU, so we are European more than the Europeans. And these resolutions, we are ready for these resolutions. We are ready also to discuss it if it needs. If you want to fix an appointment, also to discuss these points and to talk about it, we are ready. We also want to thank Geraldo and Matteo for supporting us all these 2 days. Thank you very much.
I have a proposal that I'd like to make because I've been very struck by what has been said today. One of our amendments is for migrants to be able to vote in the European elections. They play their part. They contribute in insurance contributions, for example, when they work. So they should be able to vote in the European elections. They should have the right to vote.
If I may, on this point, in France we've been working for 35 years on this, really. Situations do differ tremendously from one country to the next in the EU. In some countries, migrants have a certain period of time to establish themselves, a longer time, or even voting rights. The Scandinavian countries have granted voting rights to all non-Scandinavians if they happen not to be Swedish or Finnish. At a time when the European Union is trying to impose the voting rights of other European citizens in other countries. And they said, we don't want to differentiate between European foreigners and other foreigners. And that's an example that's worth emulating. And there are very differing legislation in the member states. And it's a battle that we can and must fight in the European Union because it's at the heart of what it means to be a European citizen. I think the entire group agrees with me in saying that we need to have a residence-based citizenship. Where you live and work, you should vote. And I think that's one of the important factors to focus on. And let me just recall that we weren't here to put questions to the European Parliament or to make an appeal to the European left. We're delighted to have had you, but I just want to get the record straight. This Parliament for migrants and refugees is important for us so that you have a place where you can work together, take the floor, and work together to get some of your demands out there and heard. I note that the right-wing nationalists and the far right, the populist right, you can call them what you want, but they are gaining ground everywhere in Europe. They're gaining ground partly because part of the left isn't bold enough when it comes to issues such as this to decry how these issues are being politicized. These racist, xenophobic, Islamophobic politicians, we need to recall that Europe had a lot of migratory influx at one stage, and proportionally to the population Well, we're talking about a minority. 60 million migrants on the continent that has 700 million inhabitants. 36 million African migrants on a continent with 1.2 billion inhabitants, and 85 of them are on the African continent. So what are we even talking about? What are we even talking about? They're feeding fears, stoking the flames. We need to do the opposite and to get to the bottom of these prejudices and deconstruct them. And Europeans are migrants. They're not expats, as we hear all too often. And in the work that we do together, it is a fight for equality, equal rights wherever we live. We as Europeans enjoy certain privileges. Our governments, not us, we, like you, are fighting against the governments, but they have responsibility for most of these situations that lead to migration when people are forced to flee. In fact, they decide if you're a migrant or a refugee. You have some Europeans who voluntarily, most of them voluntarily, decide to leave their country. Some of them are forced to, and those are the ones that the European Union and the member states are trying to push away, to the detriment of international law, increasingly. So it's a huge, universal battle across the board for equality, equal rights for all men and women living on this planet. I don't know what may come from this. The European left will continue to work alongside you if that's what you want. We'll continue to have this discussion with you. I can make a commitment to so much on behalf of my group. I think I'm safe in saying we now are going to have a group photo. I'll ask you to leave the room, and we have to find some stairs so that we can get as many people as possible on the picture. There are sandwiches that will be coming. You can eat them in this room. There's no organized venue for that. And if you're interested, well, you'll be continuing this afternoon in various different rooms. You can get the list of where these meetings are taking place and the various subjects covered and what rooms to go to at the exit. So good luck with your work. It's not always easy to play the authority role, to be the timekeeper. I'm sorry if sometimes I was a bit harsh and I cut some people off. But of course, we're used to having to speak in short utterances so that everybody can speak, and I hope not too many people are frustrated. Keep up the good work. We need you to do this work.
So, my dear brothers and sisters, the group picture now will be outside of this room is the first announcement. And the second announcement, there's one working group. Can I please have your attention one more second? My brothers and sisters, can I have 1 second of your attention? The photo will be outside, but please stay inside 1 more minute. There will be one more working group which is not on the paper, is a working group on how to proceed. That will take place from 3:30 under the workshop 6 in the Paul Henry Speak First floor. So who's interested in that working group? It's very important to have some people in there as well. 3:30 in the room of working group 6. And now please all come to the photo in front of this room.